And then what was the turning point for you with vis-a-vis the whole Heartland model? And what kind of made you
Yeah.
decide to go back into that?
Um, so what made me, so I just kept wanting to get it right because we yanked out a bunch of material from the This Land book. And also, I mean, that I had in my original manuscript to make room for Wayne's stuff. But then I came across this in, uh, in 2001. Not this particular book, but the quotations. I mean, not this version of the book, but
Okay, so this is a
the
journal. Tell us what the
quotations in
name
it.
of what's
Yeah, so this is the Levi and Mosiah Hancock journal excerpts.
okay.
And so Levi Hancock during the the Zelf incident,
Okay.
in Illinois, was it it was
So
during
let's just
that
real
science
quick,
camp.
just let me give a summary.
Mhm.
So Joseph Smith at this time, he's wandering the plains of the Nephites as he describes it to Emma. And they then come across this, and this is during Zion's camp. And
Mhm.
then they come across this mound, and Joseph Smith tells them to dig up this mound, and they uncover an ancient a Native American skeleton, and Joseph Smith identified as being Zelph, who was a white Lamanite who served under I always get it, Odenages.
Onondagas.
Uh, uh,
Onondagas.
yep, and that and okay, and so that's just given this. So now this is a journal
Mhm.
entry describing that event as well. So talk about that.
Yeah, so when they dug up the Zelf skeleton and everything, most of these these accounts that talk about that, they talk about things like um, the Zelf being the white Lamanite. He was warring underneath under this King Onondagas and everything, right? So here's Joseph Smith, the quotation. Um, sorry. So the so here's the quotation, right, from Joseph Smith's own mouth, according to Levi Hancock, what he recorded in his own journal. I mean, we're talking about, this is really fresh on his mind, right?
Okay.
This is what I told you, and now I want to tell you that you may know what I meant. This land was called the land of desolation, and Onondagas was the king, and a good man was he. There in that mound did he bury his dead, and did not dig holes as the people do now. But they brought their dirt and covered them until you see them, or till you see have raised it to the mound to be about 100 feet high. Okay, so the implication of this is geographical. This is the only statement of Joseph Smith specifically mentioning a geographical place except for like some of the statements that have implications for Cumorah.
Okay, so you're saying that in your mind, then he's identifying another Book of Mormon spot, a geographical spot.
He's identifying here, saying that, and this is my interpretation, right?
Okay.
It says this is the land of desolation.
The land of desolation, right? And that's
Yeah,
a Book of Mormon term.
that's a Book of Mormon term.
Okay, once it's important
Um,
that people hear that. Okay.
yeah, so if I can, is this something that I could share my
Yeah, so
screen
do
to
the screen
show
share.
now?
And I think it's
Mhm.
important that, when you have this whole story take place that Joseph Smith is using a Book of Mormon place name,
Mhm.
um, that's a data point that needs to be taken into consideration, which is what you did. So this is the
Right.
beginning of you kind of developing another model in your mind at this point.
Yeah, but this was 2001, though, before the This Land
Okay.
book came out, that
So
we
you came
did
across
a
this quote back before. Okay, got it.
yes.
Understood. So it was one of
Yeah,
those things in the back of your head you're kind of ruminating about, I imagine.
exactly.
Okay.
So in terms of Book of Mormon geography, this is what I call a relational map. Okay,
Okay.
this is not a map trying to do, like, on any other map, like externally trying to say, these places are in any particular place, right?
Okay.
This is so that people can see, okay, here's the general area northward, going
Why don't you
north,
pop
right?
that up on the screen for the audience so there we go.
How
All right.
about that?
Okay, so this is a
Okay,
relational map. Okay.
yeah. So you can see at the top, there's desolation,
Okay.
and then there's the narrow neck of land under desolation, meaning southward of the desolation.
Okay.
And then there's the land of Zarahemla. So here's the dilemma that it created, that this statement created for the for my beliefs on the Heartland theory. Desolation is the place where the Jaredites were destroyed in the land northward. Me and Wayne had placed Zarahemla in that area, the general area of Zarahemla. This pushes the narrow neck of land southward of Illinois down into basically Mesoamerica.
Hmm.
And that the implication is that the land of Zarahemla has to be in Mesoamerica or something like that. It all has to be southward. But that's not the way I was explaining it at that time when I came across it.
Okay.
Okay. So the way that I was explaining it when I came across it was that, it was just something that it was called the land of desolation by the people that came there after the destruction of the Nephites, um, when in the Book of Mormon where it mentions the desolation of Nehors, that was the land of Ammonihah. So they're saying anything where there's a large destruction of people is a desolation. So I was interpreting it at this time period, as even though I was aware of it, as a descriptor or an adjective instead
Right, that
of,
would be one way of looking at it. But the
yeah.
thing is that we have a
Mhm,
white Lamanite
mhm,
described such in this context, which would
mhm.
then place it, I would think, in a Book of Mormon time frame, correct?
That's where both me and Jonathan Neville have discussed this at length.
Yeah.
and um and so he sides with, obviously, with the approach of doing it, in terms of explanation, with saying it's a descriptor or an adjective of the area, right, instead of
Mhm.
saying it's the land of desolation where the Jaredites were destroyed. So it's not, there's nothing wrong with either saying it is or it isn't. It's that we have to agree that Joseph Smith actually said this,
Right.
right? That's a fact. Okay, so now we've agreed. We both agreed. Me and Jonathan. He said that. Okay, it's entirely reasonable, to take a position like Jonathan takes, or like that I
Yeah.
used to take.
And it fits right in with the whole
And
multiple working hypothesis
sure,
model
that's
that Jonathan
exactly what
Neville.
I was going to say, is the
Exactly.
multiple working
Yep.
hypotheses. But as time started to go by after, this all happened with Wayne around 2005, I was trying to kind of put together some other manuscript with the stuff that I had left over, and I was trying to expand it. And like I say, all of a sudden I was getting cognitive dissonance, and I'm just like, I got to do something about this cognitive dissonance. I got to take a position. I got to either stick with this, or I've got to come up with a new position. Well, um, similar to what I do with, because the church doesn't take a position on evolution, and I think that the evidence is strong for that. And that was not what I used to believe, but I believe that now, right? But similar to that, in 2005, around that era, I'm like, okay, I think I believe now that all this stuff up north. I'm not saying that there wasn't Book of Mormon, um,
Peoples, maybe.
peoples, and that these place names weren't actually. And see, I still believe, by the way, that these place names are, uh, Book of Mormon place names in a way that I discovered and that Dwayne Aston had brought up, that they are place names that the people, when they came, from other areas, that they brought with them. It's kind of like
Okay.
York and New York, right? It's kind of like
Hmm.
they're bringing, or in England and New England, right? They're
Right.
bringing these place names with them as they migrate.
Okay, so that's one way of looking at it. That's yeah,
That's the way I believe now.
that's what you believe
Yeah,
now.
yeah.
But
And
the key
so,
thing is though too,
mhm,
what's so interesting is that you still like Wayne May, you're a one hill guy.
that's right.
Okay,
And that's because I have to admit that I have a testimony in the Cumorah of New York,
okay.
and almost never bear testimony on things that I research. But to understand why it is that I'm so trying to find something to go along with Cumorah in New York as a rational explanation for the rest, is that you have to understand what I think I have in terms of a testimony. uh, Meso people would think that I'm nuts. That's okay. They always have. But I believe in this testimony that I have for the New York Cumorah. Even at times in the past when I've tried to explain it away and try to rationally kind of go all the way to an M2C2 Cumorah theory, it's like, no, it just, it's like I would feel, like they describe stupor of thought in the Doctrine and Covenants. It's like, well, for me, the stupor is the way I describe it is this kind of feeling, right? And similar to what I was feeling towards the Michigan tablets and the Burroughs Cave stuff, even from the beginning. Even though I would kind of, on this kind of neutral, kind of the position that I took on him, right? Even I was rationally trying to do this, right? But I can't deny my testimony in the of Cumorah. So I'm like,
Well, and
okay,
it's
what?
and you don't necessarily
Yeah,
even need a testimony of it in the
yeah,
sense
yeah.
that it's
But I'm
actually named
talking,
by very important people, by Joseph and by Oliver and even
yeah,
Joseph's mother.
yeah,
So to me, it's like you don't even need a testimony to see that there's a lot of good evidence to believe that that's the Hill Cumorah is talked about in the Book of Mormon as well. So, but I
right.
think for you, it's again, this is where faith and
Mhm,
scholarship kind of intersect, and you can't
yeah,
deny, that's part of like I'm a Christian. I
mhm,
sometimes say, hey, well, it's sometimes it's just there's your faith has to plays a role in this whole thing too. So I want to
yeah,
honor that because I don't think that we should just immediately dismiss you just for that
mhm,
because I think there's some really good arguments to be made anyhow. And Jonathan Neville talks about in his letters number 7 book. But
mhm.
I kind of want to just you wrap up a little bit about your model. I want you to talk
Yeah.
about
Let's
your
go
model
into
that you
that real
have, and then we can
quick.
talk about fair model. So did you want to show
Yeah,
use
yeah.
share
So
screen?
I'll view. Yeah, I'll
Yeah.
show the screen
Because I think
again.
it's important that we
Yeah,
really talk about this stuff and so okay that gives us an idea of like the overall that's how you look at things relationally. And let's look
right.
at your next
So
one.
I'll move on. So this is
Okay.
what I call kind of my, since Lance Weaver uses the word continental, that's a really good descriptor. But I I mean, the term that I use is semi-limited Mesoamerican, because a limited model is where people try to put everything down in
Right. Yeah.
one area that's limited, right? Um, the semi-limited is where it's kind of somewhere in between hemispherical and limited, right? It's this whole thing trying to, you know, in relation to this land southward.
Okay.
So in the Book of Mormon, it's clearly limited in the text. It's I can't deny this. The limited geography is such that everything, from the narrow neck on down, is is limited, because they would talk about, only
Distances. Yeah.
yeah, the distances
Yeah.
going only if taking a few days to go here to go
Traveling and you're
there,
right. Yeah.
yeah, or only taking a few days to get all the way from one sea to the other and
Right.
so forth. So it's clearly talking about something like this,
Okay.
where it's got, to me anyway, that's what I believe, that it's talking about some kind of isthmus or some kind of something here called the narrow neck, right? And moving into this area here, the archaeology shows, in my view of the archaeology as I see it, there's so much Mayan uh, um, influence in Chaco Canyon in the Anasazi time period, and all the earlier time periods, and so, and Teotihuacan, um, there's so much cement in Teotihuacan, it's just unbelievable. And this is what they were finding fault with Joseph Smith for so long. And so here's Teotihuacan with all this cement, and it's right where I would expect the land
Okay, so
northward
yeah,
to be.
because the Book of Mormon talks about
Yeah,
cement, and
yeah.
that would have been used as evidence against the Book of Mormon that they're not finding cement, but then we do have a place in the New World in which cement
Oh, but
was.
it's all over Mesoamerica. It's not just Teotihuacan. But what I'm
Mhm.
talking about is like a large, huge way that they built the buildings in Teotihuacan is with
Mhm.
cement, right? So
Okay,
that wasn't so much. I mean, it was more stone down here,
okay.
right? But a lot of it is like cement and stone in this area, and so forth. And you're not getting into. So I mean, these are regional differences the way they would
Okay, well,
build, right?
I just want to look at
Yeah.
this map, and I'm saying it still
Mhm.
looks quite large. Like you are
Mhm.
covering a lot of territory, and
That's right. But the Book of Mormon, from the narrow neck on all the way up here, well,
Mhm.
the scriptures, if we move, oh, well, let's see
Okay.
if I can. I thought I had it here. Where is that? I thought I had it. Oh, maybe it's this. Okay. Nope. Um, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
Let's see. Here it is. So let's. Okay. Um, so and it came to pass, and this is Helaman 3:3-4, and it came to pass in the 40 and 6th year that there was much contention and many dissensions, in the which there was an exceedingly great many who departed out of the land of Zarahemla and went forth into the land northward to inherit the land. And they did travel to an exceedingly great distance. We're
Distance.
talking
Okay.
about from the narrow neck northward, in so much that they came to large bodies of water and many rivers.
And so that kind of describes
So
what you would
this
say
is
with the
this
Great Lakes.
yeah,
Okay.
this is the Hopewell Edina sphere of area.
So you're
Okay.
saying Hopewell, Adina are Book of Mormon peoples?
Absolutely, because they've got it's clear from the archaeology, for example, the Great Hopewell Road, the Newark earthworks, all of the earthworks here. We're talking about Mesoamerican influence all throughout this. That's my interpretation of the archaeology.
Well, you
The
quite and actually, why don't you
Heartlander,
exit out for a second because I want to
sure.
show something here because you had talked about this on our
Mhm,
previous interview about the that you think that the Great Hopewell Road is a
mhm.
Mesoamerican structure. Is that correct?
Well, it's patterned after Mesoamerican sock bays, the
Okay.
white roads, that the way the sediment is layered and the top layer is white.
Okay.
It's exactly the same for the sedimentary strata in the road as they would lay it. And
Okay.
so but not only this, they would make these roads go straight, 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 no matter no matter what they would, what in the landscape they would run into, the road would just keep going straight through it or over it.
Hmm.
Right. And this is what you also see in the roads for Chaco Canyon and down in Mesoamerica. So I mean, there's a lot of, I mean, there's just a ton of Mesoamerican influence. A heartland person, with the multiple working hypotheses would say, okay, well, my take on that is that it went the other direction. Well, in the Book of Mormon, the direction of when people were moving into the areas that were not previously inhabited, it was northward, it wasn't southward.
Okay.
And the
So
same with
I
the
want to ask you now
archaeology.
because
Mhm,
I'm trying to get a real good visualization here because
mhm.
within the Heartland model, the Adena are Jaredites,
Yep.
but are they? And then what about
Mhm.
the Olmecs? Are they Jaredites as well? I mean, can you talk about?
Well, the archaeologically, as I understand it, as I've studied it, the Olmec, they have a lot of influence in their trade networks with the Epi-Olmec and other peoples all the way up into Poverty Point, Louisiana, and all the way into Florida.
Okay.
And then at this same exact time period, a little bit later than when the Olmecs first started down in Mesoamerica, you've got the Adena. And if the Jaredites were destroyed in New York, that the implication is clear. The implication is that the Olmec and the Adena and the Poverty Point culture and the Epi Olmec, they were all Jaredites in terms
Okay.
of um,
Well, that's
you know
for
we're not talking about all the peoples that mixed in with the Jaredites, though.
okay.
I mean, we have to take into account all of the peoples that would have mixed in that were already in America and so forth and so on, right? But once these people had a nation, these people were all part of that. Does that make sense? And so
Okay.
it makes no sense to say just because a
In other words, you
Jaredite,
could
yeah.
Jaredite culture,
Hmm.
you could say these were
Hmm.
culturally Jaredite people. Is that what you could say?
Yes.
Okay, that's one way to look at it. Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So now, so yeah, because we have two wars of extermination that happen in the Book of
Hmm.
Mormon, and the final the battles take place in the same spot in
Yep.
upstate New York, the Hill Cumorah. Now, another
Hmm.
question I have for you about this geography model is a lot of the
Hmm.
Heartlanders believe that that the landing point that Lehi's party actually circumvented, didn't go down through the Pacific, but they went through the Cape of Good Hope. They went up through Africa, and then the trade winds routes naturally took them to Florida, and they believe that maybe Florida is the landing spot for Lehi's party. Where in your
Hmm.
model does it take place?
Well, I don't really have any clear kind of
No skin in
belief
the
on
game on
that.
that one, or you do have it?
The reason that I don't is because I look at things in terms, I don't have any like real, I don't like to tie myself down when I change my mind, but also I don't believe that we can really nail things down in terms of cities and just, I mean, we can look at ancient structures, we can look at time, when things were dated and this and that. A lot of other geography buffs love to try to take things down, including Lance Weaver, down to looking at all of these ancient settlements and ceremonial centers and temples and so forth, trying to nail down cities. I think that that's a recipe for just it's just not, you can't get that specific in my mind, I don't
Well, and
believe.
I think it is
And
interesting too, because I
mhm,
think that even within the context of the Book of Mormon,
mhm,
we do see a great destruction happen in the land
mhm,
in when Christ comes to the New World, and whole cities are swept away, right, and fall
mhm.
into, so we know that it's going to be difficult to try to identify these places because they were
Uh,
basically wiped off the face of the earth in some cases. Now, of course, we had
yeah.
200 years of a proto millennium happen, and then
Mhm.
rebuilding and all this kind of stuff. But it's kind of would that be one way of looking at it too? That why it would be difficult to pinpoint cities because some of them
I,
just were lost to history.
I'm Yes, in terms of the ones that were swept away and buried by volcanism and stuff like that. Okay, but
Okay.
we're talking on a level of cultural heartlands, and so when we're talking at that kind of a level, and also continental level, um, see, I'm a person that really gravitates towards science. I've always really scored high in science. Just I'm a scientific kind of thinker in
Mhm.
terms of things that are in the periphery of the gospel and things that are in, that where they have nothing to do with the gospel and so forth, and where the church takes no position. I feel suddenly that I'm able to take a position that I no longer think that it'll make me unworthy or something to take, uh you know to be an evolutionist, for example, right? So I take archaeology really seriously. I don't believe in trying really hard to explain things when archaeologists have kind of explained them. And
So
so when I in terms of trying to make a different explanation than what the usual explanation is.
So basically,
Right.
this I think I want to get it out
Yeah.
there because it's interesting. Because when Rod Meldrum came on my program the first time, it was the first time he explicitly linked in the Heartland model with young Earth creationism.
Yeah.
That's in his model. There's others that are Heartlanders who don't feel that way. So
Yeah.
you're saying that you are not a young Earth creationist. That you
Not at all.
okay?
Well,
So you
I was sort of halfway young earth creationist as a kid, but my dad, he was going to be a geologist at one point, and he took a lot of classes, graduated cum laude and everything before he got sick, and he was really, really conversant with the sciences, but I was, in terms of being an Orthodox LDS, I was right there with Joseph Fielding Smith and McConkie saying evolution is evil, evolution is evil, right?
okay?
And no death before Adam. Oh, all of these people must have been some other people, right?
Right.
All this kind of stuff. Well, now I believe in the Book of Mormon and the Bible come together, and now we have a greater, and I know that you don't agree, that's okay, but I mean, in terms of when the two come together, they marry each other
Oh yeah,
in one data set.
I don't doubt the Book of Mormon and
Yeah,
the Bible have a conversation with each other. That there's no
right. but
question.
but when
Absolutely.
you once you're invested testimony wise, these two
Yes.
things are now one data set.
Got it.
Okay.
Yep. Mhm.
Well, uh um there's BH Roberts, James Talmage, all of these guys, and this other apostle, dang it, on the tip of my tongue, right when I need his name.
It's all right.
But the quote from him, and this is just my old man, I mean, in my 50s now, trying to remember the name. But he's the quote from him is basically, loose paraphrase. Um, the story in the rocks is a revelation from God. And
Okay.
as the 19th century opened, the story of the rocks and the interpretation began to come clear, right? And so now that the church takes no position on evolution, I am free now to go where the evidence takes me.
But
I
it's an interesting. I
Yeah.
love that you're an original thinker and that you are basing everything on the actual scholarship, on science, on you're not trying to find evidence that anything that looks like that something might fit into your model, you'll take and without, in other words, you got to make sure that whatever evidence you're going to present has been tested rigorously under the scientific method and that it's
Yeah.
accepted as a factual artifact by mainstream scholars in science. Essentially, that's what you're saying.
Right. Let me share this real quick to get to get back to
Yeah.
what I omitted before when I was talking about the Book of Mormon model, so I can wrap that up.
Yeah. Okay.
So this is a view, in terms of that limited area, right? Here's
Mhm.
the South Desolation. Something in this area is the narrow neck. Richard Hawk, and some others, people, Joe Anderson and some of these other guys interpret this kind of thing, this kind of corridor going along here and then up through, this kind of thing where there's kind of a narrow pass right here, incidentally. They interpret this as the neck because they say, okay, this corridor is a narrow neck.
All right.
Um, so, but then you could say also maybe it's the isthmus. Well, we're talking archaeologically now because with Mesoamericanists, because again, I am one now in terms of my land southward, and incidentally, the lands joining the heartland with Meso, I now have the strength of all the evidence from both areas. I don't have to argue. It's not this area against this area. It's all the evidence now from
Okay.
both. right? And all
Yeah,
the
see what,
good
yeah.
evidence from the Hopewell and Adena, all the good evidence from the Maya, it's all together. There's no, it's just like Book of Mormon and Bible coming together all of a sudden, right?
Oh, I
And
see.
so
Yeah.
it's this and that. It's not this against that, right? So now here we have the Adin or the Olmec, right? Right there on the T1 Tepec neck, right? Let's see if I can blow this up just a little bit
Yeah,
here. This
oh,
is
good, good.
from like Wikipedia. So you've got the Coatzacoalcos, Coatzacoalcos, if I could ever get that right, and we've got the Papaloapan, these two rivers, right? These are the main river systems for where the Olmec were. These are the main cultural centers of the Olmec. So all of this archaeologically, and I'm, this is my opinion. I don't, but there, these in terms of high civilization are just there's no comparison in terms of the high civilization that exists right here and what exists up in the Adena area.
Mhm.
Um, and so for a Heartlander, you would say, oh, well, this is a totally different area. That's fine. I used to say that. That's nothing wrong with
Well,
that.
I just want to understand. So this is Jared,
Uh,
this is what you believe is the Jaredite lands,
yeah,
um, okay, being the
but
Olmecs.
the
How
reason, go
how
ahead.
well, I just want to know, like, how are you able to tie in the Adena to this high civilization that you say does not exist up in North America?
Okay, it's because of trade networks.
Okay.
Trade networks, um, the trade network of these people, um, this particular, the Olmec, there's another set of peoples called the Epi Olmec. Okay, they're up further north, and the Epi Olmec and the Poverty Point culture and all of those cultures into Florida all form a trade network. That means that they were all interacting.
Right.
Whether
So,
they all had the same origin is
but
not
how do
really
yeah,
the
well, how
point.
do you, but I mean, I know you mentioned that earlier, but I
Mhm.
just want to understand how you can tie that into the mounds of the Adena culture to these cultures. You've tied those
Yeah,
together, but how do you tie
because
that with them?
the reverse is true also. The trade network of the Adena went down into the Epiolmec and Poverty Point cultures.
All right.
So
Okay,
they're,
thank you for clarifying that so I can
yeah,
get a better understanding because you've done a lot of
yeah,
extensive work and probably thought all these things through.
yeah.
All right.
And so these are in terms of, um, you know, if you say, were there any Jaredites left over? Absolutely, because it's not, the people on the outskirts probably weren't wiped out. I mean, these people ended up going in up into New York, fighting everybody, and then I mean, because interestingly, archaeologically, the Olmec also disappear.
Well, and then of course we know that.
But then you've got the Epi-Olmec interacting with the Maya.
Yeah, and we also have like
Yeah.
Hugh Newbley's observation that we still see
Mhm.
Jaredite names in the
Yeah,
Book of Mormon times,
because
like with happening during the period of the Nephites.
right. So you've got, so this is what I believe. Now, I believe differently from John Sorensen because he places the Grijalva River as the Sidon. Okay. I'm different because there's an important archaeological consideration here that kind of differentiates the Grijalva from the Usumacinta. Okay, so the Usumacinta is longer, and it goes into, for the most part, throughout most of its the way the play, the area that it goes through, it's going into the lowlands from the highlands. The Grijalva instead, for the most of the way that it goes, um, it's all through the highlands, and only a little part of it goes into the lowlands. Okay, and then so that means we're talking in terms of Book of Mormon geography now, these are the heads. This is the main head of the Usumacinta. And so that means that Manti was in somewhere around this area. Okay. And then up into here is where Zarahemla would have been. Okay. Somewhere in this kind of
All right.
lowland Usumacinta
Now, let
basin.
me ask you, has anybody else
Yeah.
identified this river as a Sidon, or is this your
Tons. There's a
okay?
big controversy among
Which one? Which
Mesoamericanists.
is the right Sidon? Okay. Yeah, I'm not as versed in the Meso
Yeah,
stuff as I am the Heartland stuff.
yeah,
So
yeah.
okay, so
The Meso people are split down the middle
split down the middle, and you okay?
about what's Poseidon.
Interesting, interesting. Well, I
So
was there.
mhm.
I guess for a lot of people, was there any more slides you want to show us?
I'm trying to remember. I think that might be the last one, but this one, like I say, is you know, the to me it's the best candidate, and it's because like I say, most of this, oh, there, I'm sorry, one more thing, and that is not only that it's for most of the area that it runs is in the lowlands. um the archaeology is that the Epiolmecs and Zapotecs were up in here, okay, in the Grijalva area. Not, I mean, some Maya, but I mean, there was a mix, but primarily Zapotec, Epiolmec, this kind of thing up through here, right? This is Maya. This is like totally Maya. Okay. And here's the important criteria is the Maya came originally, I mean, they were up in here for long time periods, but the first one of the first parts of the Maya organ or civilization in the Book of Mormon time period appeared here first in the highlands. That's exactly the pattern we expect to see in terms of Nephites first inhabiting the highland, land of first inheritance and land of Nephi. Okay, then then you have these migrations in the exact right time periods going down into the Usumacinta basins areas. So it all fits to me.
All right.
So
Huh.
yeah.
Well, thanks for sharing
So
this.
yeah. So that's that.
So we got ourselves a new contender for a different model. What are you calling this model?
Well,
Or
it
can we call it the
depends on.
Continental, or do
I
you
don't
know?
know. It depends on what me and Lance end up doing.
Okay, so you and Lance, if you guys collaborate, get together, you can come up
Yeah.
with a model. It'd be great
Hmm.
for you guys to maybe put together a paper and
We're
present.
not going to put a model together.
What's that?
We're going to have two separate models no matter what we do.
Oh yeah, yeah, because you guys are you don't not in full agreement, but you can have a
Yeah.
general area where maybe you can find some
Yeah. I mean,
consensus in certain.
Lance's narrow neck is like Baja, California, right?
Oh yeah,
From
yeah,
what I remember.
I
And
think
then
so.
his land southward is down into like um southern Mexico instead of Guatemala, right?
Oh,
So I mean, there's
there's
differences.
some
I mean,
differences. Okay.
but because he isn't of the Mesoamerican paradigm of people that put things down kind of south
Okay.
southeast of Tehuantepec, right, where the Jaredite or where the Olmecs were,
There's
right?
there's multiple
Yeah,
Heartlander models too. This isn't the
yeah.
only one. There's plenty of different ones out there, so it could still fall within a particular category that we
Mhm.
maybe haven't got a name for yet. But I know he calls it
Well,
continental.
he calls it continental. I call it semi-limited meso.
Semi-limited meso. Now,
Yeah.
all right. Well, this was interesting because now I got a lot of new
Mhm.
information I have to digest. I have to now think of Olmecs and Adina. I got to think Maya and Hopewell.
Mhm.
I got to think of uh, stuff primarily happening in the Messel setting, but then the final two battles for both
Yeah.
civilizations happening in New York.
No, you're sorry. Let me just clear this up real quick.
Please do.
The people that were originally Adina, some of them survived. They were the root of the Hopewell culture.
Right.
Um, and also the Poverty Point and Epiolmec people moved into the area too. Okay,
Okay.
they were there the whole time before the Nephites got there. So these peoples are mixed,
All
and
right.
so just keep in mind that it's the Mulekites were probably a mix of Phoenicians and other Middle Eastern peoples that came with the Phoenicians and had some kind of something to do with this Israelite king, or the son of this
Mhm.
Israelite king, I should say.
Right.
And the corruption of their language and so forth was because there was other Middle Eastern people with them.
All right.
Well, as I pointed out, the Usumacinta, I think, is the Sidon. And so this was the area. The reason that it's called the Sidon is because that's a Phoenician word, Sidon. That's a city in Lebanon, right? That's a Canaanite city. And
Wow.
so why would Nephites name their main river that? Well, they didn't. The Mulekites were there first. The Mulekites named the city Zarahemla after their king.
Hmm.
So I mean, down in the Usumacinta Basin was in the first place was where the Mulekites and whoever else mixed in with them from that were already there. See, I
Okay.
mean,
Okay. I get what you're
yeah,
saying, that
mhm,
there's cultural diffusion going on.
yeah,
And
yeah,
so it would be kind of like intermarrying going on, or people that are
mhm,
born into a, so it's like you don't have to be
yeah.
Italian to be a Roman citizen.
That's
But
right. But
okay,
so
go
now
ahead.
we're hybrids. We're hybrids. So here we go. All of these people mixed in together, and there was no purebloods. But then that's why Mormon had to distinguish himself and say, "I'm a pure descendant of Lehi," because he's distinguishing himself from people that were mixed in with
Okay, so that
Mulekites and
answers why
yeah,
maybe that kind of is a
mhm.
hint in the Book of Mormon that there were other peoples that inhabited the land.
Yeah,
Because of course, yeah, because that was one of the criticisms, that basically the Book of Mormon was the story of all the people, how all the New World was peopled, and you're saying there were
yeah,
people here
but
before anybody landed.